Perfect. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you here. Happy to have you all attending today's session. My name is Vlad Surdea-Hernea. I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences Boku in Vienna. Previously, I got my PhD from the Central European University and a Master in Public Policy from the Hertie School of Governance. My research interests, they vary, but mostly I study climate and democracy, specifically looking at political behavior and how different types of actors, usually populist varieties of actors, interact with environmental themes and topics across different regions, usually Central and Eastern Europe. And I'm very happy that today for our lecture we have with us Dr. Sandra Ricart. I will make a brief introduction of her because she's a phenomenal lecturer to have. So Sandra is an assistant professor in the Environmental Intelligence Lab at the Department of Electronics, Information and Bioengineering at the Politecnico di Milano in Italy. She holds a PhD in geography in experimental sciences and sustainability, awarded by the University of Girona. She had multiple postdoctoral stays in Spain, France, Italy, and the Netherlands, and she was an invited professor at the Landcare Research Center in New Zealand, as well as a visiting scholar at the University of California in Los Angeles. So, as a human environment geographer, Sandra's research focuses on climate change narratives and behavior, ranging from farmers and stakeholders' perspectives, delving into how social learning and behavior modeling can be combined to enhance adaptive capacity, robust decision-making processes, and most importantly, trusted policy co-design. She co-authored more than 60 publications, attended dozens of international conferences, and participated in multiple international and national research projects. Sandra serves as an assistant editor of the International Journal of Water Research Development and for PLOS One Journal, and she's also professionally an evaluator of the European Commission as well as different national research councils. Today we'll be talking and we'll be delving into the European farmers' protests and citizens' attitudes towards agriculture in a climate change context. And without further ado, I think I will give the floor to Sandra to share her screen and tell us every exciting thing she can tell us about this topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vlad. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for inviting me. Just let me confirm that I can put the full screen and it's looking somewhat good. Okay. Okay, so can you confirm me that it's looking good? And that it's all right. Okay, thank you so much. So again, thank you so much for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be part of this summer school. As also thank you for the introduction. It seems like I work a lot, but most of this work is in a collaborative way. So it's just the result of most of the learning process, social learning process that, as mentioned before, it's at the core of this of my background. And today I want to share with you the farming perspective related to the populism and also related to this climate change and climate extremes that they need to face. This is part of, it will be more or less a theoretical or more conceptual introduction, in the sense that just to know which is your background also in terms of farming or agriculture or the nexus with the climate change, but also some type of experiences from their side, some news regarding this populism and farming nexus that I think that it's at the core of this lecture. So just let me share the roadmap of the presentation. So just to be sure that I can provide you some highlights about the European agriculture framework and how farmers are seen, what we know about them, what we know about farming and farmers in Europe, the main policy that we have in your hands, that it's the Common Agricultural Policy, and also, of course, the link with the European Green Deal. And also, of course, and this is not just affecting farming, it's just affecting all of us in all the sectors, but how climate change impact agriculture, which is the main perception that they have about these impacts, and particularly how these impacts also motivated most of the reactions or the protest that will be in the next step. That is something that occurs particularly and most at the country level in 2024, but at the more local or regional scale is something that these protests are also part of the day-by-day activity of the farmers, because they need to ask for answers to most of the issues that they need to face in their activity, and how the far-right programs also, I would say, not just programs or strategies, also how the groups, the far-right groups, and the policies and the politics have been used these type of messages to try to capture the attention. And at the end, some type of also key issues about if this will be also just the starting point, if we think that this type of protest and this type of nexus between populism and agricultural reaction needs to be also expected in the next years or just few months. So just to give you this first overview about the European agriculture and the farming, and more or less just as the picture of some data that it's open, and this is just the main phase of how agriculture in Europe is working on. And just to give you, or just also to put the focus more on one of the key points that also as a society, so as citizens, we need to I think my opinion is that we need to focus also on that, not just in the reaction or the claims of the sector, but looking at the farm demographics. So looking at how the sector is more or less robust, because the sector is able to provide the main issue, that is food production, and how they can supply farming output, so food to us, is that point in which farm demographics is declining. So it seems like there is not so much younger people dedicated to farming instead of other sectors that are more maybe innovative or are more able to capture the attention to the youngers. So this is one of the also key points on the protest that we will see then. And some of the issues or facts that also at the policy level will, I will say, will be the basis of most of the critics and most of the claims of the sector. So how this sector will survive, considering not just climate change, but also how all those that are able to dedicate their effort to be farmers or to be part of the farming community, if they have some expectations in the future, or they think that their activity should move to another sector. So this is one of the main concerns of the farming community. But also what we have seen at the European level, and this is something that, of course, the big numbers usually also doesn't provide us the local picture, and maybe at the country level, at the regional or local level, we will see some differences to this graph. But generally speaking, at the European level, we can see how there is these two sides of the same coin. So we have really small farms, and then we have the big farms. And this is also important for the policy aspect, because most of the contribution to the common agricultural policy will be defined by the extension, so the hectares that the farming community has. So this type of duality of the sector is something that is also a reason for debate, a reason for discussion, and ultimately a reason motivating the protest, because part of the sector is not, or seems to be not really represented by the policy and the parties that define or protect, seems to protect agricultural activity. But also this is another graph on that. So how more or less this agricultural area, so what the land under farming is more or less changing, and which is the property of this land, because most of the decisions in the day-by-day activity, but also thinking on the future of the farming community, when a farmer needs to take a decision, it's important to know if they have the possibility to define the future, considering that they are the owner of the activity, or they need to also make some type of agreement with the tenant or the common land if this is the case. So in this case, most of the discussions about the land and the farming is related to how the land could be managed, considering that most of this land is rented, but also how the owners of this land has a vision for the agricultural activity, if they are able to, for example, be more adapted to climate change impacts, of if they are perceiving climate change as a key issue, or if they think that there are other problems, other concerns, like, for example, ensuring the survival of the activity because there are more younger people dedicated to farming. So this type of distinction between the owners and the tenants is something that is also on the table on the discussions, and how most of these protests in which we have seen, and we will see in some pictures, we will see younger farmers on the road because their future is in discussion. So this type of access to land and have the ability to decide on their own future is something that is also on the table in this protest that we will see in the next slides. But also just to give you, in case if this is not your core activity, your core subject, or you are not familiar with that, just some overview about at the country level, which at the European level, the countryside, which are the most productive countries, because most of the attentions in this or the focus of this protest and how the far right has been able to lead most of the discussions take place in those countries that are more aligned with farming activity. That is obvious because it's some when the audience, in this case the farmers, are able to listen something different. So in this case, just to see how at the food production side, most of these countries are leading the discussions, and we will see this also in the section in which I will just provide you some examples of countries in which this protest has been more, I would say, focused on specific issues, but also more common challenges with other countries. And also, again, just to give you the floor, that there are some countries in which these protests have been more relevant because the farming activities is higher, but also because there are more concerns, or maybe the mobilization of these concerns have been more evident, particularly in the newspaper. So this is something else, of course, being online. Most of the recaps of how the information has been shared during the protest and during the far right's messages, the online, the social media, and the newspapers have been, or the journals have been the main platform to try to distribute this type of information. So in these cases, Italy, Spain, Poland, France, and also Germany, here, for example, Brussels or Belgium in this case as the country, it's not, I would say it's not one of the biggest producers of fruit, but instead most of the protest has been focused on this country because also of the European Commission establishment. So this type of, okay, where we have the food production, where we have the farmers, and then where the protest has been carried out, is not just a linear line, but it's also something that we can see when we consider the relevance at the country level of most of these protests, because the message is not just internal. It's not just how Spanish farmers are saying to the Spanish people, we need some help to try to face climate change, to need to face all the challenges and economic challenges, all the messages that we want to share with you. These messages are for others outside the country. And this is why, for example, Belgium concentrates most of the mobilizations at the ending point of this protest. And then just the same as vegetable, just to have in mind that there are some countries in which this mobilization, this concern about the future of agricultural activity and how farmers can survive to all of these inputs that they need to include in their activity can also have more or less relevance, considering the importance of their activity at the internal level, but also as part of the European community. And the same for the livestock. So these two sides of the farming activity, from the food production, but also from the livestock, is something that, so crops and livestock are the two main activities in which farming is moving on. And also here you can see some dominance of specific countries, Southern Europe countries, but also Germany and more on the eastern side. But then how other countries has not too much activity, for example, in livestock, but the protest has been also important, like in Hungary, for example. But one of the key points that I want to share with you in this case is, for example, how, and also considering this first slide in which I share with you one of the main concerns about the survival of the activity due to the lack of younger people aiming to be dedicated to this activity is also exemplified in the number or the population of livestock. So how is increasingly difficult to also maintain this type of activity, not just for the crop side, but also from the livestock, because most of the regulation at the European level, most of the messages about how the future of the agriculture and the livestock needs to be is also requiring more attention to animal dedication or animal good status or good standards of life quality. And this seems to also have some effect on the capability of farmers to try to ensure their population, livestock population. So this type of statistics can also help us because they are really recent to have this picture in which most of the main concerns are also related to not be able to ensure the future because they cannot reproduce the traditional or the past activity, for example, from their parents or older generations. So here you can see in a summary which are the main output of the agricultural industry. In this case, it's also relevant to see how the words are used because, for example, here for the first time you can see agricultural industry, but in most of the reports, also at the European level, but also at the national level, it seems like industry, it's more agro-industry even consider it, is not reflecting most of the concerns that we will see as the motivations for this protest of the farmers, in the sense that most of the small farms are not really aligned with the practices that the agro-industry or the agricultural industry are promoting. So in this sense, also this dichotomy between the small farms and those that are really industries of food production is something that in the protest has been also seen. So the last one, and this is something that I want to share because it's, again, in line with the main problems of the survival in terms of population or farmers dedicated in the future to maintain the activity. The other point, but of course is really aligned with this, is how much people, but also which type of income these people, these farmers are receiving for their activity. And we can see here that this is, in some countries, it's increasing, and this is something that can be observed as positive. In other, maybe those even more bigger or bigger than others at the country level or at the population level can see some type of decline. But what is also important here is if we can take the picture of the last 15 years, we can see how in general at the country level of the 28 countries, we can see how there is a decline on the agricultural input for farming activities. And this means that farmers are tending to poverty because it's not possible to maintain the same type of inputs and outputs, even if they are continuing with the production from several years ago. So all of these requirements, new requirements, environmental, but not just only that, also some type of trade-off issue related to, for example, the trading or the agreements with countries outside the European community are affecting the way in which they are able to respond to the new cost between the benefits are not really aligned with this or cannot make or face these new costs that are included in their activity. So in this case, most of the issues about how the farming is responding to this far-right aim to try to capture new votes or new or potential audience is also aligned with which type of farming we have and which type of farming we can expect in the future. And the key point is that if we don't have farmers and if the farmers that we have are not able to survive because the inputs that they receive, economic inputs, are not able to cover the cost, is something that in any sector, in any activity, economic activity, means that this activity is in serious danger. So, and this is something that the far right, it's also considering. So it's part of the message that they want to share, that there is other way to do farming, because this farming is not working. So a way to try to put the farming discussion at the European level, I would say that it's trying to understand how at the European level the policies have been able to address or respond to some or most of these challenges. Here is the main policy is the Common Agricultural Policy, that maybe you already know. This is about 60 years old. So we have some information to try to understand if this policy has been able to address past, current, and future challenges. Here is just a way, in a graphical way, a visual way to try to understand all the challenges addressed with different objectives, that this even common agricultural policy, but what is important here is that it's an agricultural policy that, of course, aims to address other transversal issues, and this is something that we can expect from an European policy, because it's the framework, the umbrella in which most of the particularities at the country level, at the regional level, we need to also have reflected on that, and we need to also address in a more specific and adapted way. But this is more or less all the objectives that this agricultural policy has. In few words, the first one, and it's important here, the order, because the first one is, of course, ensuring that farmers can live from taking care of the food production at the European level, but also their life, the standards of life or quality of life is also ensured. The quality of food, of course, so quantity and quality, but also which type of agriculture, which type of food production we want to expect from farmers. And here I would say that this is this third point is where the common agricultural policy has evolved a lot in these years, because of course all of us more or less have evolved on this message on trying to be more sustainable, trying to be more resilient to changes, trying to be this nexus between the natural resources and the human activities or the human needs also, of course, to be aligned in a sustainable way from social, economic, and environment perspectives. But also, the last point is more considering all the functions that agriculture or the farmers do, even if these functions, these services are not covered by the Common Agricultural Policy. And here, more or less, standards on rural development, but also more aligned in the last renewals of the policy is more aligned with ecosystem services and all the landscaping and even recreational issues that the farming landscape has been able to provide as citizens as benefit of this countryside. But also how these objectives that we can agree that are more or less clear, how these instruments, how these objectives have been able to be applied. So there are three main instruments that this policy put on the hands of farmers after a lot of bureaucracy, but there are these instruments. And here you can see the first one is the direct payments to be farmers, so to ensure that they are acting as a common good. So providing food for all of us is a common good, so this means that needs to be supported by the policy. But also try to equilibrate or balance the market in terms of which are the agreements inside, outside of the European community, to try to ensure that all products are safe, but also all the products that are being exported are being moving outside or the barriers or the frontiers of the European community has also included these quality standards. And the last one, it's, as also mentioned before, it's more about how we can ensure that all the services, all the benefits that farming activity, if is sustainable, is resilient, can support to us. This means also as the citizens, we need to try to provide some feedback on that, and we try to also ensure that, for example, young farmers can be able to ensure the future, considering all the requirements and all the changes that this activity is expected to support in the coming years. So just to think about, or even our role as citizens, and how this policy as public money, that as all the policies that has a country budget that of course is managed at the European level to try to ensure this common strategy, in this case from the agricultural sector. This is something that is also provided every 2-3 years, more or less, in which the main or the key issues, the key topics at the European level, so all the topics, all the issues that are concerning citizens, but also the policy or the country or the governments, are put it on this surveys, in which, as a sample of the European population, we can also observe how citizens at different countries perceive a policy, perceive a sector, and so on. So in this case, in this in this case is the last Eurobarometer that we can see, that is, I would say, this every 3-4 years, it's also replicated, asking about how Europeans perceive agriculture and the policy and the common agricultural policy. We can see here some of the main, I would say, landmarks of this. And in general, as you can see here, there is a recognition of farmers as providing something that is crucial, that is a common good, that is something that as citizens we cannot renew. So we cannot avoid this type of management of the land, management of the food production. But also what is interesting here is that some of this feedback also ask for responsibilities of the farmers. And here you can see at the last point that the focus on, okay, farming is strategy, but we need to also be sure that a specific type of farming is enhanced. And here you can see these keywords as safe, healthy, and sustainable. This is something that will be also on most of the messages that we will see on the protest, because in order to ensure this type of responsibility, also farming community farmers are requiring some support. So this is something that is the discussion between the citizens as consumers and the farming sector as producers. So in most of the protest and also in most of the far right's messages, this idea of us and the others, us as the farming community, as citizens, the others as all the sectors that are not promoting or ensuring that this nexus between production and consumption is really fair, is really safe, is really sustainable, is something that will be part of these messages. So positive perceptions of this policy, we can see here that we have this stabilization and the market perspective. So how all the non-expected changes, non-expected policies outside of the European community can have an effect, direct or indirect effect, on the farming community, and how we can try to provide something that can guarantee that the food production is ensured in the borders. Then how this also food security is not just ensured, but also is provided in quality terms. How is also ensure that those that are working on the farming activity can receive the just and the trust on the citizens, and how this can be also approved by this standard of living, and also the protection, this nexus between agriculture and environmental schemes or environmental services that I would say in the last 20 years, even 42 years, have been at the core of most of these discussions on the budget of the policy, but also in the recognition of the policy as transversal, not just focus on agriculture, but all the services, all the benefits that agriculture is providing to other sectors. But of course, this, as any policy, has also the other side, and this is more negative, or something that also will be at the core of most of the discussions. Here, particularly, I would say that the key point for the protest and the key point for the far right messages is the last one. So it's, or the two last ones. So the competition, particularly on these open doors to products, food products that maybe are not following the production standards, the quality standards, or the safety standards, or the economic competition. So in the sense that maybe are not accomplishing with something because our products are not competitive with the others outside the European Union, but also the last one. So how this policy has been able or not to try to ensure that this support, this financial support, because is an economic support, try to also ensure that all the other points can be covered just by a payment due once a year and for specific reasons, or if the farmer accomplishes with the specific issues. So in this case, and moving in the last 5 years, we have the European Green Deal that is applied to all the sectors, and of course also at the agricultural level. And we can see here that the key point, and this is one of the, I would say it's not the point in which most of the protests have been able to start the discussion or try to move the discussion to the streets. So this mobilization of the community, but of course it was something that just insist on most of the challenges that the community, the farming community also have from the policy, from the common agricultural policy, but also in general due to the national disparities, the heterogeneity inside the European community about the type of farming or the type of fruits or the type of strategies, local strategies that are promoted to try to be more resilient to climate change, but in general to try to survive or to try to ensure that the activity is moving forward in the future. So in this case, I would say that the European Green Deal has able to just put more attention in what the sector, the farming activity, the farming community needs to address in a very short period of time. So I would say, as you can see here, it was launched in 2020, and the standards needs to be achieved by 2030. This means 10 years that the farming community could be really, really few time, because most of the strategies, for example, considering water efficiency or trying to promote a new irrigation method or change the crop because maybe it's more efficient or maybe it's adapted to climate change, for example, all of these requires time. And also considering what I mentioned before about the tenant of the land. So if they are tenants, if they are owners, most of the decisions to try to be more adapted, to try to ensure that this climate law at the European level, it's more or less addressed. This means that there is a need for agreements, there is a need for changes that usually takes time and takes money. So this means that also some of the small farms cannot achieve these goals. And this is something that, again, it's part of at the core of most of the protest. So here you can see the three main issues in which, with numbers, in which the farming community needs to make changes in order to achieve the European Green Deal. And as you can see here, the first one is more about the internal strategy to try to be more efficient, so in terms of pesticides and fertilizers. But the second one is more, as I mentioned before, as a strategy for the future. So promoting or trying to enhance organic farming means that your whole structure at the farm level needs to change, because the needs for the traditional farming and organic, of course, needs different inputs, and the outputs are obviously also different. But also the last one, so how this sustainable food production can be really ensured at the supply chain. So this type of requirements that are summarizing and are added to most of the challenges that the community has is something that motivates the type of discussions on the protest, and also the far rights groups that take the key message that the farming community is in danger and we need to make something because the European policy is not able to cover their needs. This is more or less the leitmotif, and then we will see some examples on that. And just the last point, just as the adding challenges for the farming community. So we started thinking about how the community is, more or less, the high message. Then, which are the main challenges of this community, considering also how the policies are able to try to support farming or even can insist in most of the weakness that this farming community has. And then there is the big issue that is climate change and how climate change can intensify most of the issues, most of the challenges that we have seen before. And here you can see once, I would say that the three main issues in which the farming community, particularly in those that are working on the crop sector, also the livestock, it's important, particularly on the water scarcity. But in general, I would say that these are the main challenges that the impact of climate change can be identified as the key points or what the farmers have in their hand, because it's something that they can do, but also how they need to address this. And this is something that also when we directly ask to farmers, and this is just a result of one of the research in which we ask directly to farmers in order to understand how they perceive impacts, which type of worries or concerns they have through surveys. So directly asking to them how they perceive climate change, which are the main issues that they need to address in their activity. And we can see here that, of course, there are different, and we just provide a list of impacts, but here you can see how most of them are really aligned with warming temperatures, with these increased extremes related to frequency and intensity of drought or even heat waves, and also how the erratic or the changes in rainfall distribution also affect most of their activities. So it's also really known how this type of impacts are also increasing most of the challenges that they have, considering the climate change expectation just to in the near future, I would say. So all of these, so the traditional or all the issues that the farming community is continuously, or I would say regularly addressing, because most of the problems are coming from decades ago, but also these new requirements, environmental requirements, but also economic and also sustainable requirements. And then the climate change as a new issue in which, as an umbrella of most of these, are changing the rules. All of these can be exemplified in a farmers' reaction that has been exemplified in the protest by the end of 2023, but particularly on the first months of 2024. And this is something that you can see here, because sometimes a picture it's more relevant than some words. Now here you can see how there is not just one way, there is not just one country in one specific place in which a problem has been identified, but there is no solution. Here is more a tendency that moves from one country to another. Of course, in those countries in which farming community is more concerned about some of the issues that are in discussion during these tables, in which there are a lot of concerns to address, but it seems that there are not sufficient solutions or actions, practical actions to carry out. So here you can see how this starts. Most of the reasons for the motivation, as you can see here, are based on three main issues. The low food prices, this is something that is related to the market that I mentioned before. The new regulations particularly focus on environmental issues, because also this is related to climate change and how all the effects at the land, at the water resources can be maximized. And this means that there is some restrictions that the farmers need to address. But also the last one point, and I would say that this last point is one of the key points in which the far right, the populism side, has been putting the attention, because it's in some way the reason that motivates more focus on the nation and how at the country level we can do something more, instead of share the concern, share the challenges at the European level, because in this sense there is something that maybe at the country level can be lost. So this is one of the messages that, or the points that has been more focused from the far right side. So yeah, just some examples here. You can see how in some cases these motivations or these protests are mainly focused on these three main points that I mentioned before, but also I would say that here the common agricultural policy has a role. So this policy, as I mentioned before, has 60 years old, more than 60 years old, And this means that in each reform, the policy has been asked to, of course, achieve most of the new goals, the new objectives, the new strategies to try to face the new challenges, but it's also expected that most of the past challenges can be solved. And one of the main criticisms of this protest is that as a new reform, farmers always have some back on the traditional expectations of the policy. So most of the main objectives from the 62, so the 1962 objectives has not been covered until or after 60 years. And this is something that most of those that have been mobilized in this protest trying to highlight, because it's something that it seems like we are not moving forward. We are not moving in the new direction. We are just maintaining the status, and this status is obviously not working in this new context on climate change, but also in this competence at the market level or with different rules on the food production chain. So this type of, okay, we have these three main issues, but also we need to know that we have a policy that is planned to resolve most of these discussions, and this is not happened. So how we as a community, as a farming community, can make something different if the rules are not helping us to try to be more aligned and more resilient to the new picture, the new challenges. And this is also the message that most of the far-right groups try to concentrate in their meetings or in their feedbacks. Yeah, just let me check. So yeah, just some examples at the country level. Here you can see one example from, and I just mentioned here the Belgian, because it's where most of the national mobilizations has the final stop. So this mobilization is not just on the country level, but in some cases also they are moving to Belgium to try to concentrate that this is not a country or national level, this is an European level, and all the efforts needs to be put at the European level to try to resolve particularities, but also, of course, to have a common vision about how to solve these challenges for the farming community. And I will say here just how the messages has been able to be managed. And here, for example, one of the key points is the market. And you can see here as highlighted in this frame that the rules, the regulation is one of the key points on this discussion, in this protest, because it seems like there is different rules according to who produce the food, who sell the food. And if the rules are not the same, it seems like there are these disparities between one type of farmer, one type of agriculture activity, and the other seems to be disbalanced or unbalanced. So this type of messages in which there are the us and the others, because the rules are different, is something that, again, it's part of the far-right discourse. But also, this is not just in Belgium as I would say, one of the big places in which most of this mobilization has been able to be concentrated, but at the national level, then in each country, the focus is to move to the government or the government institutions to try to put the pressure on the way in which the decisions are made. And here you can see, for example, also in France, that there is a lot of mobilization in order to understand how this type of discussions could be also aligned with I would say this France, for example, was traditionally is one of the countries at the European level that has more recognition for the agricultural sector at the law policy, but also in terms of governance and government, because farmers have been prime minister. So the agricultural sector, I would say, is well recognized as one of the key sectors of the country. But most of these farmers feel that they are not really represented at the European level. So in this case also, the far right tries to differentiate between the farmer recognized at the national level at the France level in this case, and how this representativity at the country level is not recognized when we put all the farmers at the same place at the European level. So this is also something that even from the Farmers Union has been discussed a lot. And then we can also move to other countries. Here it's in Germany. Also, you can just check some of the messages, in this case, are not part of the far right. We will see then some examples. But here is more about how the union farms or farmer associations are able also to concentrate most of the messages that then the far right will use to try to gain audience, to try to dominate the message and try to have a specific and clear message to those that can be potential voters. So I would say that here also the traditional policy has been... Sorry, I can continue. So maybe here also you can see some type of differences between the traditional groups, the traditional policy and the far-right policy, because it's something that they are really active in trying to capture which is the message and try to reproduce and replicate as much as possible. So most of these messages are just used to try to gain attention, and then of course there is no message far from that. It's just the highlight, but it's something that can be used and it's useful also to be part of the discussion. And it seems that they are moving faster than the traditional parties or the traditional policy groups, and also in Italy. And just so just to translate some of the messages, for example, here we are farmers, we are not a slave. So this idea of we are working for a common good, but we need to survive is something that is on the message of most of them. And also in most of the you can see here just two examples of direct farmers messages, but also this type of idea in which this is just the beginning. So we are waiting a lot for this type of mobilization. Now we have a voice. Now we are able to make some noise. And this is something that is not just, as I mentioned before, it's not just particularly on an area. It's not just for one type of crop. It's not just for livestock. It's in general, the farming community, even if you are small, if you are big, you are not really represented in this type of mobilizations because there are other type of strategies, I would say, in this case. But as a small farms, this is something that the mobilization can give us. So this type of protagonism that even for us as citizens or urban citizens could be just challenging to understand this reality. So this is something that farmers at the individual level try to share with us as those that also as consumers, we need to ask for more regulation, but ensuring that the rules are safe, are trust, and are common for all the players. And then, yeah, also, of course, in Spain, it's just also this message in which the land is useful for food production. We need farmers to try to ensure that food production is so to ensure food security, food sovereignty, and then also, of course, there is some particularities at the national level, but in most of these messages, also the risk of climate extremes, how this drought that, for example, in this country has been also really heavy in the last years, but is also common as an extreme in the European scale, is something that we need to address. And this is not just one policy. We need to have a common vision about how the farming community needs to be solved. And yeah, so just to close this and just to move to the far right focus.
I think we need to soon conclude the...
Yeah, just it's really
Thank
fast.
you, yeah.
Just if there is space for another protest, this is something that just started here. So most of them are at the national level are thinking about considering another mobilization because 1 year after there is not so much to change. Here also, this is a far right, just an overview of the elections because there is this coincidence between the protest and just a few months after the elections of the European Parliament. And we have seen that most of these messages on the far right has been also mobilized, particularly in specific countries, as you can see here on France, but also on the eastern part of Europe. So in general has been also really aligned with this mobilization, and part of the far right messages has been able to arrive to the potential audience. And here you can see just the highlights of this type of messages that has been used for the far right, trying to convince to the farming community about how they think on the future of farming if their decisions can be taken at the European level. But also what is more interesting here is that maybe in most of these messages, we can also identify how this frustration of the farmers. And this is the key point, I would say, in this, at least in this sector. So this idea of maybe the new ones could solve something that the old ones has not been able to solve is something that is at the core of most of the intention to vote. And just to finish, this is how also this movement on the far right has been able to address different strategies. So reinforcing those traditional parties that has a far right statement, and this is clear in the case of Rassemblement National, but also how other new farmers, new groups has been able to be created considering or coinciding in this context. So I would say that this also is moving in a direction that maybe in the few years we can see also how the farming community tends to move to these more populist messages. And yeah, this is also just to, I will share with you this presentation, but just to give you some issues about how farmers also think about renewing these mobilizations. And also this is how the behavior of different countries can be expected. But in general, I would say that there is this need to try to mobilize again, to try to gain this populism, not from just far-right parties, but just to put farmers in the streets. And just to finish, I would say that most of the messages that has been shared during the mobilization and this use from the far-right parties is that farmers are important, but the use and the way in which these farmers are seen is different from the populism side. Is more about gain new audience, new votes, but from the farmer side is more about how to solve existing and current problems. So here just ideas of merging protest and the populism and how they interact. So this idea of us and them, this idea of we are here to try to support you because we are not part of the elites. We are farmers are too, even if we don't have land or crops or livestock. And then this idea of national identity, how all outside Europe seems to be, and even Europe itself seems to be far from the reality at the country level. So we need to reinforce the national perspective because the European perspective seems to be a loss in all the common goods, but not in the particular needs. And yeah, this is just a list of readings, particularly in news, that I think that can support most of the discussion. And yeah, thanks so much, and sorry for being too far.